Hi, I'm Kevin Paulin.
And I'm Ben Backus.
And welcome to the Falling Up Podcast. On today's episode, we have the pleasure of sitting down with Mr. Alden Woodcock, who is the Executive Director of EMERGE Connecticut. EMERGE Connecticut is a social enterprise and a 501c3 who works with those that have been recently released from incarceration and help them get construction skills.
And we have it's a really interesting episode in the fact that so many of our guests to this point have really shared their kind of first-person experience of overcoming obstacles. Mm-hmm. And in Alden's situation, he spends a lot of time speaking from kind of, I guess you would call it a second-person perspective, where he has the privilege of watching individuals overcome really, really great obstacles, right? They're coming to him at oftentimes the most vulnerable part of their life, leaving incarceration. So he really gets to see what are the specific principles that work when someone really buys in and is able to make change versus when they kind of go back to their old ways.
Absolutely. One thing that stood out to me was how important a support system is to Falling Up and how he is the leader of the support system that these gentlemen are and ladies are privy to have access to that may have never had a support system to begin with. And like you said, the principles of vulnerability, accountability, transparency, honesty is all the things we talk about in this episode and things that each and every one of us can practice to raise our level of life.
Yeah, and he breaks it down in a way that, at least for me, was really motivational, and I felt like, I'm ready to go. I'm ready to do this.
Yes,
so, we're really grateful to have him on. And without further ado, we bring you another episode
of the Falling Up Podcast.
Yeah, I think we can start anywhere, jump in anywhere. I've been excited to have you on for a while, and I was bummed when it didn't work out, and now you're here, and now I'm excited because I think this is kind of the core of why we started this podcast, and we've gotten away from it in some episodes, but I think this episode really bringing back kind of how we overcome obstacles, and you being the executive director of EMERGE Connecticut. Is that EMERGE Connecticut or EMERGE CT?
No, EMERGE Connecticut.
Okay.
Yep.
You have the privilege of watching individuals quite literally come out of the hardest part of their life, or often one of the hardest parts, and begin their journey of recovery, rehabilitation, life, essentially. So it's almost like you have probably some of the cheat codes on the inside of saying, hey, this is what people do that really works and helps them overcome versus this is what they do when they go back to their old ways. So I guess a good starting point is kind of what brought you into this field and what kind of gave you, what sparked you on your journey?
Yeah. No, I just love, I was thinking about what direction kind of like you guys would want to take this and stuff like that. And I always feel inadequate kind of talking about things like this in terms of my personal experience because, my, stumbling blocks and obstacles and stuff like that are nothing compared to some of the people I meet at EMERGE every day. But yeah, no, I you're right. It's absolutely a privilege. I think that's the best way to put it. Just to be able to see people at this very difficult point, but in a place where there's support and there's love and accountability and structure and all these different things that are helpful. But just loving and just thinking about the name of the podcast on the way here and just thinking about Falling Up and how a lot of these guys, once they're able to kind of trust the process and let go a little bit of that hesitancy or resistance or discomfort and realize that you're safe in this process, now you can allow yourself to kind of fall into whatever's coming your way and be there to receive it when it comes.
So to take a quick step back, can you just fill the listeners in on what EMERGE Connecticut is all about and kind of just what it looks like?
Yeah. So Emerge is a little bit different than most like nonprofit organizations. We're a social enterprise. So we are a 501c3 nonprofit organization, but we are also we're a minority owned construction company, small business, registered and insured with the state of Connecticut. So we bid out on construction jobs just like any other contractor. And so that's kind of the thing that makes us so, adaptable and like resilient. And it also is what brings people in the door, because we're able to hire folks coming home from incarceration as crew members on our construction crews. So people come to Emerge looking for a job. But what we're interested in is, doing the real work, the personal development work, the internal work that's kind of necessary to experiencing, peace, coming home from the criminal justice system. It's, obviously it wasn't the plan. So like, it's not like, little kids are saying like, can't wait to grow up so I can go to prison. Like things didn't go the way they wanted it to, right? And trauma occurred and like different things happened and systemic kind of like influences affected, the outcomes for a lot of these young people, and falling into the criminal justice system is unfortunately extremely common, especially in Black and brown communities across the country. So you find folks who are traumatized, don't have the tools to navigate these things, and all of a sudden are incarcerated, and that trauma is being like, doubled down upon and just like perpetuated and really ingrained into the individual. So when you come home, Emerge is hopefully a place where you can just like pause, right? And hopefully be a place where you can begin to heal. And that's really the goal. So we do that through this model. It's a transitional employment model. It's widely used across the country. We have our own kind of spin on it, but it's basically you work, part-time. In our case, it's 24 hours a week. So you work 3 days and then you do different programs and stuff like that. The other 2 days of the week, and that's where the real work happens. That's where Kev comes in and does that financial education. You know what I mean? That's where Rich and some of the other guys do the mentoring, the coaching. We do what we call real talk, which I believe Kevin has experienced, which is essentially group therapy. But if we called it group therapy, no one would show up. Right. So it's like real talk is essentially just like an opportunity for us to have to just develop a stronger relationship with honesty, with the truth, and holding the mirror up and really having a safe space to examine some of our patterns and just like be honest about them and share, and like the power of telling your story, and the agency and all the stuff that you gain from just like being able to tell your story and not be judged and actually be empowered, because by me connecting with my vulnerability and my authenticity and sharing authentically, I'm giving the next person permission to now be vulnerable and share. If I keep it light, you're going to keep it light too. But if I'm willing to go there, you're at least going to start to get more comfortable with the idea of going there. Yeah. So that's where we try to really do a lot. We do the parenting class, which builds off that. And honestly, to keep it short, I think all this stuff, like you're going to learn construction, you're going to learn landscaping, you're going to learn how to operate a weed whacker, right? But more importantly, you're going to learn a lot about yourselves, and you're going to build community, and you're going to have a launching pad to kind of like propel yourself forward onto whatever's coming next. And I think what we're really trying to do at Emerge is just destigmatize mental health. Because I feel like that's one of the most important things. I mean, physical health, mental health, like there's not much, community, right? Those are the things that I think are like super important. But yeah, we just try to be a place where someone can like land for 6 to 9 months depending on the person, and, you know, get some things in order, right? Get a driver's license, get a bank account, get like,
Right.
you know, kind of build back a foundation and then launch into whatever's coming next, you know?
So how'd you get hooked up with Emerge?
So I was born and raised in Willimantic, Connecticut. I, you know, I don't know. My history is kind of just like growing up in a neighborhood where I was the only one that looked like me. I was in classrooms that I was the only one that looked like me. And I just had a different experience than most of the people I ended up going to college with, for example. But like, I was just hyper aware of, you know, the different experiences in America, like early on. And so I think like, and my mother was a community organizer, you know.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So,
Okay.
so like, it was just, I mean, she had me canvassing for like politicians when I was like 12 years old or whatever. Like I was doing phone banks and stuff. I don't know. But anyway,
really?
so like I was really aware of this, and that was kind of like, she was always in nonprofit work. So for me, you know, when I was in college, I studied cultural anthropology, just like other cultures and stuff like that. And, you know, when I got out, I was like I had really fallen in love with New Haven, and I really wanted to get involved in community level work, but not necessarily organizing. So I was taking informational interviews, and I landed in Dan Husino's office, my predecessor and mentor and friend. He's been like a father figure to me, and so many others, right?
Yeah.
But what he did was he didn't realize it at the time. He thought he was like snatching me up because he needed help, and he thought I could provide that to him. But what he did was he gave me a home. You know, he gave me a community in New Haven. He gave me a purpose in my life, you know, at a young age. So once I got in there and I figured out what that was, I was like, you know, I read the new Jim Crow. I read, you know, like I once I saw like what this was and what was going on, like I couldn't stop, you know, like I couldn't, like I had to like go as hard as possible, you know, and learn as much as possible. And just, you know, that's kind of the trajectory I've been on. I've been there coming up on 9 years now. And there's no place I'd rather be.
Yeah.
It's like, it's family. It's like, I can't turn away from it. It's like, you know, it's part of who I am now. It's crazy.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite things to see is when people find that passion and that purpose and how it does take a hold of them. And you said, hey, I couldn't stop learning, or I couldn't stop trying to figure out more. Like, you definitely could, right?
Mm-hmm.
You didn't have to do that, but something grabbed the hold of you and went. And when you started there, it doesn't sound like that was 100% the idea of like, hey, I'm going to run. When did you know this is what I love? And how do you describe that? Because I think so many people get lost on trying to find that perfect fit that they don't realize. I know for me, when I find something I like, it's like this little light switch turns on, but it's real dim, right?
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
I do a little more and I learn a little more. And then I learn a little more, and that light switch goes a little more and a little more and a little more. And all of a sudden it is all consuming. And I'm 100% in.
Yeah.
What was that process like for you? And I'm sorry for overwhelming you with questions.
No,
but what was that process like for you? And is there any advice you could give to someone who doesn't know that exists? That finding something that you can get so excited about exists?
Man, it's hard because I feel like it's grabbed me at different points over the last like 8.5 years. I think when I first like started to see, man, there's so many different times. I think for me, it was just like, it was real simple, honestly. I'm not going to overcomplicate this. It was like meeting the first crew member who came in, right? Like new, you know, because we do like cohorts, right? So that first cohort, like this dude, like I did the initial interview with him, and I remember just like making this list of like things that he, like barriers that he was facing right then and there. And I mean, it was like everything, like it was the credit, it was the banking, it was the child support, it was the license, it was the alcoholism, it was like
mental health,
everything you could possibly have and to work through, you know? And I was like, I remember being like, whoa, like this is why like this place is like, and just seeing like he stayed with us for like a year and a half, longer than most people do. But he, like, I remember we do like a tutoring component. I remember like he was in tutoring, and, you know, this particular individual had, you know, had struggles with alcohol, you know, since early teen, like 12 years old. Right. And so like he didn't do well in school. Right. So like for him to, because he told himself, and other people must have told him too, that he was dumb. Right. You know, like this was the narrative. I can't do this. There's no way. But he like conquered that, like math and reading, like, and he got to like the 12th grade level on the CASAS test, which is one of the metrics we like go for, because that opens up the door at the adult ed, gateway, and the workforce board, right? Because those are the tests that they use. I remember this dude was probably like 5'6", right? Pretty slender guy too. He picked his tutor up like and hugged him with joy when he passed that test. Like, you know what I mean? Like he got a job out of Emerge, leading a crew at Liberty Community Services, and they gave him a key to the safe haven. You know what I mean? To like, this is like, when he got that key, he came to Emerge with his badge, everything, and he was like bawling, crying. Like, this is like, and you know, we can like remove his name or whatever for this, but like, this is just like, I think it's people, man. It's like, you know, because it's hard work. You know it. Like, it's hard work, man. You sometimes it's really easy to focus on the people that it's not clicking for or might not get it.
Yeah.
Because my fear is like, you know, there are guys that didn't get it, and I see them on the New Haven Green to this day. Yep. And my stomach flips. You know, when I think about like, what could we have done different, right? Like what could have gone differently? You know what I mean? Yeah. And definitely. It's like, you know, I don't know. It's easy to focus on those instances, but I think like every so often there's somebody who just like gets under your skin and like really, you develop a lifelong bond with this person, and you see them just move on to do great things. I think that's what happens all the time. And then like the other thing, just professionally speaking, like starting to feel competent in the work, you know, and like feeling like, because like I have imposter syndrome like through the roof, right? You know, white dude, I shouldn't be doing this. I don't have lived experience with this. Like, I got to get out the way. And I do think that. I do feel that. Like, I do believe that. But at the same time, like, on a personal, like, development tip, just like kind of just like proving to myself that I can do certain things that I never would have done, like pushing myself outside of my comfort zone, you know, addressing fear of vulnerability, addressing fear of, you know, trying new things, addressing my own stuff, you know, like, and that's another thing that brought me into it a lot was like, at a certain point, I had to start going to see a therapist, because I can't sit here and tell you, oh, you really should think about seeing a therapist. And I've never like experienced that myself. Yeah. Like, what am I telling you to do? Like, so investing in my own mental health.
Yeah. You know? What you just said, that one word to describe everything I heard is awareness. And it is so important knowing that there's so much I don't know what I don't know. And when I go and I do new things, I get a few more answers to that test. But sitting there and saying, hey, I know I'm this white guy who doesn't have the lived experience. I need to stay out of the way. but there's all these other areas that I do have experience in and that I am an expert in, and I can pass that knowledge on. That's beautiful. And I relate back to sports, and I look at the greatest players in the world. Well, they know what they're really good at. They know what they're not good at, so they work on those things in the off season, but they don't work on what they're not good at during the year, right? They hone in on what they are good at.
Yeah.
And that's what I hear right there, where it's like, hey, I'm going to see a therapist. I'm trying to improve some of these blind spots I have, but I also know what I'm good at, and I know the area that I'm not quite there.
And I think with that analogy, it's just like, if I have a certain game, like, like I'm, LeBron James or whatever, like I'm definitely not LeBron James, bad example, but LeBron needs AD, LeBron needs like these other guys, like he strategically builds his team around him with his like blind spots or his,
that's right.
strengths and weaknesses in mind.
Yeah.
Like me coming into Dan's shoes, if you should really have Dan on here one time. That would be a great podcast.
Dan is something else.
He's something else.
Yeah.
And he he's a big personality, right? And he's got the lived experience. And he's from New York. He's overbearing. He's like, he's the main character in any room, right? So like for that to leave and for me to be the ED now, I'm like, there's no way. You know what I mean? And it's never going to be that. So how do we as a team kind of just like step up? Like we got these huge shoes to fill. None of our feet will ever fill this individually, but we can collectively fill these shoes.
Yeah.
And just seeing Rich, seeing Reynaldo, seeing some new faces come in and just like fill that. And like, wow, I look around me now, a year and a half, going on 2 years later after he left, and we have a team. It's like a strong team. Like, and that's what pumps me up, is like seeing other people flourish and like thrive, in this thing. And that's huge. So yeah, but that's impossible without self-awareness, right?
Yeah.
So
alumni, Emerge, I love Emerge. There's so many things that Winning Ways is taken from Emerge, and I think one of them is alumni, lived experience. Can you talk about what you guys do with that? Because Rich, people like that have that lived experience, and now they're working there and giving back and, working with the guys that's coming in. My personal experience is watching that relationship is just amazing, and I do see the value of someone that's been through the program and coming back and helping out. So can you like touch on that? Because that's like your blueprint.
Yeah. Like I lean on, Rich and the supervisors for, just about everything program and work related. Honestly, I mean, they're the integrity of the program, and like that's where I put most of my energy, is into making sure that they have what they need, because they're the ones that are going to make the real difference in people's lives. I can send a couple emails and like do some grant reports and like things like that, but and do the operations. But I mean, those guys are really creating the relationships that I thought I was creating when I was doing like the case management work and stuff like that. Like, so the way we structure it is that there are folks who come through the program and are hired as full-time staff, and they are supervisors on job sites, and they are, in Rich's case, he's the personal development coordinator, so he does a lot of the programming and facilitation and coaching and stuff like that. And it's just crazy. Like, he has somebody that's like under him, that has a master's degree and stuff like that. She's just getting started in this field, right? And she's learning from him. And like that, like that's the way that we do things at Emerge, is like, those folks are really changing lives. Like, actually, it was funny because like on, what was that, Wednesday, we have our morning meeting, 7 a.m., just with the supervisors to like get the cruise together for the day and like figure out what's the plan for the day. And a lot of it is just us joking around and like easing into the day, and like they're hilarious. Like we got some comedians like JD and like some of these other guys, hilarious, right? So we're joking around, but like I'm just like sitting there and I'm just like, everybody's looking at me like waiting for me to like start the meeting, and I'm just like looking at these guys and I'm just like smiling ear to ear under my mask, right? And because I'm just like, wow, like you guys are changing lives, like literally,
yeah.
like what?
Yeah.
Like your power is insane.
Yeah.
Like the impact you're having on humans, like in this town and their families, like is wild. And look what you've accomplished.
Right.
Like what?
Yeah.
Like, could you imagine when you got here, when you got home, what you'd be doing like X amount of time later?
Yeah.
Santos. Like in and out of jail, never was out of jail for more than 2 months. He's been out 4 years.
So what's changed in his life? If you were to break down some of the principles in what you've been able to see and witness, and because that's massive, right? When I've been doing something forever and the pattern and the evidence shows, hey, every 2 months I'm being incarcerated, and now I've been out 4 years, something clearly very identifiable changed.
Right.
For him, it was really just like, I think he started to gain, Santos always references the tattoos on his face. So he's like, I was never planning on going to work. I wouldn't have gotten these, that wasn't the plan, right? And when I started seeing a need for work in my life, and I was tired of going through this process again and again, I had, like he felt like unworthy of or undeserving of these things. Like he felt like he'd never be a part of that world, right? And he's just gained confidence in himself. Like nobody treated him any differently at Emerge. Nobody, all the shell he had put around himself in anticipation of being judged or whatever, like at a certain point he realized he didn't need to wear it anymore. Like he could just be vulnerable. A lot of this stuff is we're just terrified of being vulnerable.
That's it.
You know what I mean? And it's just like, once you realize that it's okay, and it honestly makes you not only not like, because people think, oh, that's not masculine. It's not masculine to be vulnerable, share your feelings, stuff like that. When you realize the masculinity and the power and the realness and the authenticity that comes with that, like that's you setting yourself free. But the other thing that he did was he just, instead of going home at the end of the day, he'd go into the shop. And he'd learn how to use this tool that he wouldn't have been using otherwise. And he used his paychecks to buy hammers and drills and stuff like that. So he started doing side hustles, with these drills. And, like he built up his own tools. He built up his own customer base. And he started doing side work.
Wow.
So he just like, he's like, I'm good.
Yeah.
I know a trade now. Like, forget it. Like I'm good for life.
Yeah.
And it's just finding something that you have some level of passion, some level of expertise, and the rest follows. But you mentioned so many things that have me pumped up right now. One, the idea of being vulnerable, right? And I think that goes against human nature, right? If you look at where we are today, right? Well, we evolved from cavemen. What was the caveman's sole purpose, right? Survival. And they only had that bottom brain. So that bottom brain is our survival brain. And whether we know it or not, from the minute we wake up in the morning to the minute we go to sleep at night, we care about staying alive. Yeah. And feeling vulnerable is not that. And if I'm not aware of that, it's so easy for that bottom brain to hijack that top brain and do the things that make me stay alive. But the crazy thing is the reality, survival short-term versus survival long-term are two very different things, right? And when I sacrifice the long-term for the short-term, that's when those problems happen. So something you touched on a couple times in this conversation is the importance of honesty and how honesty and transparency almost blows up that vulnerability, because I let myself do it, but then I get this great response from actually letting my guard down and letting people in and learning new perspectives, it's pretty beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when you go honesty, vulnerability, transparency, it all starts with being courageous, right?
Absolutely.
So like how does someone come and emerge? And I think I know the answer, but matter of fact, I'll share what I think it is at least. So I think if someone comes into emerge and lack of self-confidence, lack of whatever, and they're especially being courageous enough to be vulnerable, I think the real talk groups and seeing alumni sharing will then give you that confidence, right? Is there anything else? Am I missing something in terms of that? I think that's pretty much it though. But like, when you share and have that openness, it's because you've probably seen somebody else do it. And it gives you like, okay, I could do it too. Because I know that's my like life mission is to share what I do, not to like gloat or boast, but more so you can do it too.
Yeah.
That's really.
And that there is kind of my number one cheat code, I think, outside of breathing is if I want something, I find someone who has it and I ask them how they've done it. And then I try to copy them step by step because I don't need to recreate the wheel. Yeah. And when you're in a group and you have clearly so many of the people that work at Emerge are very charismatic and just good, solid humans, right? Yeah. And that can be contagious. When I put myself in that environment, all of a sudden I find a true mentor.
There you go. The environment changes because when you're growing up where we grew up in terms of inner city, all that stuff, and you're running with a certain crowd, you get rewarded for doing bullshit. Now you walk into Emerge, you get rewarded for being vulnerable. You get rewarded for being punctual. You get rewarded for doing what you're supposed to do. So when you get the environment is just a straight flip, right?
And you're not a punk for doing it.
There you go.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, man. Yep.
I'm not gonna get a job. Like that's for punks. Like that's for whatever. Yeah. So to see Rich, to see Santos, like these dudes are not punks.
Yeah, at all.
No, like they'll tell you, at all. And you don't even need to ask them. Yeah. Right. So I mean, this is like, okay, and as corny as it sounds, like, okay, it's cool to do the right thing.
Well, it feels good.
What a if we can make it cool to not do that and do to provide an alternative, we won.
Yeah.
Because now you're going to have people with influence buying into something positive and a way out.
Right.
Because it's hard to see a way out when you're so ingrained in this.
Oh, yeah.
It's hard to see a way out. For some of the guys, they get to Emerge and they're like, I'll never be out of the streets. It's impossible. There's no way. Because even if I start doing the right thing and I really commit to that, somebody's still going to be upset about something I did before. And this is a real fear. I talked to so many guys about this. It's like, what happens when somebody wants revenge?
Yeah.
What happens if somebody decides that I'm a target?
Right.
So what happens?
Dude, it's dangerous. And this is where things get really, really real is depending on what you did, and what you were involved in, it can haunt you forever, right? And it can, despite doing the wrong thing, it can be the reason that you go early, and it's terrible to talk about, but, we lost somebody last summer. And to be honest, we lost somebody a few weeks ago, honestly. This was an alumni, somebody that we worked with years ago, had been doing the right thing, had been out for years, doing well, was, I guess, kind of still associating with certain folks and was, I guess, on the fringe of some beef that happened and just was, he was killed in broad daylight, dude, 1:30 in the afternoon. I mean, this is this guy has 4 kids. He was literally, he had a great job with benefits and everything else, still lived in the same neighborhood, still had some of the same acquaintances, friends. I mean, you really have to completely almost upend your life.
Yeah.
You really have to completely separate yourself from folks. And I think that takes long-term mentorship and this is where that alumni stuff comes in. It's like we need long-term support for folks, because you could have a certain set of tools, but if at any point you start to forget
Right.
that, oh, okay, well, I hung out with this dude like X amount of times and it was fine. Now it's like, all right, I can hang out with this dude. And it's just like, or I can start doing this. And you start kind of slipping back into, but like, honestly, the best advice I've come up with so far is just try to make the safest possible decisions and be very conscious about the relationships that you're having, right. Especially understanding your past. It's like addiction.
I was gonna kind of make that connection. And it's really, really the idea, and I think the words like courageous, that's where the courage comes in. And then such a big piece is like, how do I set boundaries and how do I set my intention? Because I have so many people in my life that I've had to let go of because their paths were different than my paths. And that doesn't mean that if they were to reach out, that there couldn't be some level of relationship, but it would be very protected on my end. Meaning if someone was reaching out for support, or if someone had the same interests as me, certainly like let's make it happen, right? But if it's going to be the same things of the past that don't really serve a purpose in my life today, I protect against that. Yeah. Because I'm not immune to going back there, and I know that very well. And then you kind of mentioning, I think as humans, I'm sure I've said this on here before, like we shed friend groups about once every 10 years.
Yeah, you said that, yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. And it makes sense because someone who served the purpose out at one time often won't always serve a purpose throughout if we're progressing. But boundaries.
That's so true. The issue with that is the culture. We're talking again. I don't care, New Haven, Newark, LA, it don't matter. When you're in the inner city, it's your day ones. You know what I mean? Like you're supposed to be loyal to your day ones no matter what they into. And that's where the guilt comes in. That's where the I'm leaving folks behind. A lot of hip hop music is like a big diss is, oh, you left the hood. You know what I mean? So when you have that, when you start creating that disconnect, it starts having this weight on you basically. And now you feel like you can't go back home. So now when you do go back home, it's you. So now you feel good because it's people you grew up with. So it's this catch-22.
And a lot of times it's not even friends, it's family. And that's where it gets really, really hard. Because it's like who am I to tell you not to hang out with your brother? Like or whatever. Right.
Yeah, that's true.
So like this is where it gets really crazy. And that's where I think it's like therapy and stuff like that is incredibly important to just understand and have a really honest, relationship with like, what are the dynamics and what are the triggers and what is the history, what really happened, with me and my family, and like, how do I maintain boundaries? Because you need that. And honestly, there is this sweet spot where, and I'll say Rich, I think is probably the best example of somebody who's achieved it that I know of, is he still lives in his neighborhood. He's still very much respected by the folks that he was in the streets with. But they know his boundaries. Right. They respect his boundaries. They are proud of him. It wasn't always like that. There was a point where they were like, oh, you're a punk, or you're this, or you're that. Like, but he tuned it out. He stayed focused, and not everybody can do that, or not everybody's ready to do that at the time we want them to do it.
Yeah, or have the tools or the formula for doing that. Because that takes having a really strong support system where you can, if I have no support system, I'm going to go back to some support system, right?
Yeah.
No matter what, because I'm going to, unless I'm totally comfortable being alone, which very, very, very few humans are, right? I'm going to go, it's kind of like the saying, oatmeal is better than no meal, right? Some friends are better than no friends, at least in our minds. So, and then what you're saying too, like this idea of how do we relearn how to think, and how do we really test our thoughts and act less on pure emotions and more on logic, which again, so much of that is done through action, right? So many people talk about, hey, how do I change the way I think? And I'm come from the firm belief that you change the way you think by changing the way you act. Right. And I think we get that mixed up sometimes. And that's where I'm very much a behavioral therapist, where I think actions matter the most. Because if I'm thinking of if there's something I'm afraid to do, I'm not afraid of doing that. I'm afraid of my idea of what doing that is going to be. And when I actually put that to the test, almost every single time it's something totally different. And from there, now I actually have an accurate thought of what that thing is, and I get the conditioned response. But it's so scary to take that action. It's so scary to do something new.
It's back to that courageous, man. I know we keep going back to Rich, but somebody like Rich to do that, it's like, all right, in the beginning, he came into his neighborhood, came home, started changing, oh, you're a punk. Then 3 years later, he's doing it or whatever. Now it's like, oh, they're saluting him because they seen the courage. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and it goes back to that support system. Emerge, because if somebody telling you a punk here, then the next morning you go to a place that's giving you praise for changing, you know what I'm saying? At least there's this fight. Usually it's just one side. Like usually there isn't an emerge for a lot of these guys, you know what I'm saying? Or ladies. There isn't a support system to reaffirm those thoughts. Because like you said, like I ain't never met someone, well, I'm lying. I met one person in jail that was that was planning on coming back. But 99.9% of everybody that's about to go home plans to stay home. You know what I mean? They don't want to go back to jail, but if your support system is everybody else is going back to jail, you might be going back to jail, or if not worse. You know what I mean? So it definitely boils down to that support system and having at least one person in your ear telling you it's okay, keep fighting, keep pushing.
Yeah, you have to.
That's everything, man.
There has to be voices like there has to be more incentive to like kind of stay focused, and there has to be people that kind of fill that community void, because we need community, we need connection. Like human beings, we're hardwired for connection. We need that. So like if you're able to identify some secure, healthy relationships with folks that understand you, you have less of a need for those other relationships.
Yeah.
And after maybe the first couple of times you choose, because you have that power, right, to say no, then you say no is a complete sentence, right? But it's one of the hardest things for us to say to those that we care about and we love when they're suffering, because what you're talking about is like in neighborhoods where there's extreme poverty, drugs, all the, we all know, you have to see your loved ones suffer in a way that we don't, like in Branford or wherever. Like, not to say that there aren't issues in other areas, right? Like we all, addiction, alcoholism, all the depression, all this stuff does not discriminate, right? But when you see just like systemic struggle, like, and it's playing out in people that you love, like your sister or your brother or like somebody that you care about and you do anything for. Because I'll do anything for my siblings. Right. You know what I mean?
Yeah, same here. It's
just about understanding what you need, right? Because I can't give you, I need this water. I need this whole mug of water right now. If there's extra in the bottle after I pour it in here, you could have the rest. But if I got no water for me, then I'm not of any use to you. It's not the best analogy, but it's like, once we start to realize that we can actually take care of ourselves and be, more helpful to people, like Rich takes care of himself first. And it's funny because he had to say no to this person, that person, this person, that person for a long time. Even sometimes you got to say no to your kids or your family members. But once you get to a point where you have a self-care practice and you're mentally healthy and you have your basic needs met for yourself and your independence, like now he's got a better relationship with all those people than he ever had before, because they have And it's funny because when I started saying no to people in my life who were just, I felt were just taking, right? And I wasn't taking care of myself because I was bending over backwards for these people. Like at a certain point, like I would just start to say no. And it's funny because they figured it out. Like that emergency, that crisis that needed my attention right then and there. When I said no to that and I took care of myself, they found a way to get it done.
Yeah. Well, it's this thin line between helping and enabling.
Yeah. Yes,
right.
Yes,
and that at the end of the day, when I think I'm helping someone because I'm saying yes, well, what I'm really doing is I'm taking a valuable skill or minimally reference point away from them. And that is what I need at some point or another. I need to be told no to feel the pain or the discomfort of that situation to learn how to, one, either not put myself in this situation or how to get out of it myself. Yes. Whereas when I say yes every time, well, now I'm the safety net. Now I'm taking this incredibly valuable life experience and opportunity away from this person. I feel good about it because it's uncomfortable for me to say no, right? Or I get really resentful about it because it's uncomfortable for me to say no. So it goes either way. Whereas when I am able to have that boundary in place, not only am I going to give this person an opportunity to experience something for the first time, potentially, but I'm also protecting myself. And I know I look at it so many times, even in like my experience with my family, like they enabled me for a long time. And when they finally stopped enabling me, that's when I was able to learn some really valuable skills and start learning how to climb up by myself, or at least reach out to another person who wasn't going to do it for me, but could at least show me the roadmap.
Right. Those are powerful.
Yeah. And being on the other end of it, like it sucks hearing no. It's a terrible, terrible, terrible feeling, especially when you want what you want when you want it, right? And all of a sudden now I can't get it. But at least...
What the hell you mean, no?
Yeah, looking back, those are some of the most powerful things I've ever heard were no. And even now, like, I hate hearing no.
Yeah. That was like one of my things. When I was coming home, I had a few things, and my two main things was, one, I don't want to start stuff and not finish it. I was real good at that. I'll start so many things and don't finish it. So when I came home, I said, whatever I start, I'm going to finish it. I got to finish it. And then saying no, because... even the situation that landed me in incarceration, right before it happened, I'm like, I don't think we should do it. I don't think we should do it. Nah, we should do it. All right. And I promise you, I never even told you this. Right before it happened, my mom called me. I'm in the car. My mom calls me. And I pick up. I said, Mom, I'm going to call you back. I'm going to call you back. Are you all right? Something's not right. I'll call you back. I'll call you back. I called her back. I'm in the precinct. You get what I'm saying? And when she called me and everything, my whole energy was like, don't do it. No, don't do it. You sure? Well, you shouldn't do it. And that's one of my, I try not to say regrets, but one of the things I wish I could have changed was having if I really been like, bro, no, like we're not doing it, I'm pretty sure he'd have listened. You know what I mean? But I was just like, yes.
I've never got the saying, no regrets. I don't have any regrets. I've never gotten that.
You never understood that?
Not really. I think regrets are like a pretty beautiful part of life.
Well, I look at it like I don't like to regret things because without that happening, I wouldn't be here.
Sure.
So I don't want to say I regret it. I feel like I made a bad decision, but in the moment, but then that poison turned to medicine. So if I regret it, it's like, okay, I don't like how I took that lesson and grew from it. So I don't like to regret it. And because when I think of regret it, I feel like I want to erase it.
Sure.
And I don't want to erase it. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I guess I just don't look at regret in that manner. I feel like you can do both. Like I definitely regret the fact that I fell off the cliff and like can't walk.
Yeah.
Definitely regret that, but I'm very grateful for a lot of the lessons that I've learned and the patience and the wisdom and all those things it's brought me. But if I could change that, I would. For a long time, I used to be like, no, I wouldn't change that. But like, I would if I could change that and still learn those lessons in another way, like a little bit of a softer way. Like, absolutely, right?
I got you. Yeah.
Fair. I don't know.
That's fair.
Yeah, that's real. Yeah.
Yeah, that's real. Because the same thing. If I could go back, Mero, you know, Hell yeah, I'd have changed it. I'd have told him, hell no. Hell no. You know? But yeah, for sure. For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So going back, because I the gentleman that you were talking about who, started his kind of side business and was buying the tools, how long did it take him to get to that point where because I just want to make sure I'm hearing the whole thing right. Like, he came to you guys, he started to realize, wait a minute, I can work. Mm-hmm. Then he found something that he was interested in, found the side business, started buying tools. How long did that process take for him?
Yeah, I honestly, so the other thing about that process for him in particular was, you're also unpacking a lot of the stuff that happened. Like, Santos came, he still has anger issues for sure. I mean, he wouldn't have any problem with me saying that because he says it every day, but he has, rightfully so, anger issues. I think for him it's a never ending process, right? Like, the process of getting savvy with the tools and like figuring out that he can make money and like do for himself and provide for himself without doing anything illegal. I think that probably took about a year and a half. But the recovery process continues. I mean, Santos came back to Emerge after being gone for a little over a year and a half. And it was one of those things where it's like, coming back and just being like, do you guys need help here? And it's just like, yeah, we do. And it's also like this unspoken thing of we both need each other. Like, we need Santos. Like, having Santos has been a game changer, and I'm so glad he's back. But Santos needed us too. He was at a point in his life where he's fed up working for these, landlords. Half the crew was alcoholics, right? I mean, this is like not a great environment for him to be in.
Right.
Luckily that's not his, vice, but it's still frustrating to work with a bunch of drunks.
Yeah, absolutely.
But anyway, so it was just not a healthy environment. And I think he needed to come back. But like, everybody participates in Real Talk, whether you're like, you're writing grants or you're, first day in the door. I mean, you're at Real Talk, it's mandatory. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, he has the topic this Friday, so I'm excited to see what he picks. But yeah, it's a never ending process, man.
And I guess the reason I ask that is patience is such an important, right? When they say patience is a virtue, there's so much truth to that, where things don't happen overnight. And to hear someone day in, day out working for about a year and a half to kind of start this side business, that is accurate. That's what goes into change, and having patience and tolerance and beginning to learn. You mentioned the anger, the emotional regulation skills to be able to deal with the ups and downs in that journey. There's one of the cliche sayings is don't quit before the miracle happens. And there's so much truth in that, where it's not easy. I don't want to say it's hard to build businesses, to do things like that. I think it's time consuming. It takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of being able to ride out the emotions, right? But if you show up, at the end, you're doing something. You're investing in you each day. I just wanted to hone in on that length of time, because I think so many people think, oh, I've been doing something right, or I've been working really diligently for 2 months. Why don't I have what I need?
Yeah.
And one of my favorite sayings of all time, 9 miles in, 9 miles out, right? If I walk 9 miles into the woods, I can't turn around and walk a mile out and think I'm going to be out, right? The only way out is 9 miles out.
Yeah. No, for sure. That instant gratification is the worst. That thing is that's our society now. It's a microwave age, and everybody wants it yesterday.
Yeah.
And it's just not reality.
Well, at the end of the day, you always pay for what you get. I always try to I get this built in, and I know this is totally delusional thinking and justification, but like I've never been able to use nicotine really responsibly. So for the past like 3-4 years, I have nicotine season where for a few months out of the year, I use nicotine heavily. And then the rest of the year I don't. But I always, the nicotine season recently ended for me, and I'm like, I think 3 weeks out. And I remember during those, it's about 3 weeks, something like that.
Damn, time flies. I feel like
it does fly. Yeah. But I always write notes for myself every year to remember. And this year, one of my notes, it said something along the lines from last year. Reading it was like, everything has a sense of dread and misery. But when I acknowledge that, I get this feeling of energy and hope. And it's this idea, like, I'm supposed to feel crappy because chemically I got some crazy stuff going on in my brain right now. I'm supposed to not feel well. I have to pay for what I've done. And when I acknowledge, like, hey, this is temporary, it always goes away. It's just a matter of time. And it did. And then you get through it, and I feel like I'm Superman, and I'm able to feel good. But
I like that.
No matter what, I think it's important to acknowledge that there's no, if I want to start something in 2 weeks, it's probably going to suck, right? If I want to start something in 2 years, it's probably going to have a pretty good chance of taking off.
Right.
It's funny. So when you said earlier, like, you're showing up for yourself or you're giving yourself a shot in so many ways, like, we kind of, like, when someone gets to Emerge, one of the messages we want people to get, like, from day one is, like, give yourself 6 months. And that's not enough time. But if we can get somebody to give themselves 6 months, now we're in a place, we're out of the fog to a certain extent, and we can start making some choices and decisions.
That's real.
And,
when Rich got to Emerge, he tells a story about how, because, like, a lot of guys get home, they want to get right into a relationship, or they want to get certain aspects of a relationship.
Yeah.
But they find themselves in relationships as a result, right? Because we all know how this works. Anyway, Rich gets home, and he tells the story all the time. And he's on the deck. He's talking to this guy, John. John is like no nonsense. Like, he'll smoke you. As he says, I'll smoke you. Like, like, if you're messing up, I'll smoke you.
Yeah.
Like, so anyway, he just doesn't pull any punches. But anyway, Rich is on the deck. He's just like, he's texting somebody, whatever, or he gets dropped off by somebody or something like that. And John was like, so who's that? And he's like, is that your girlfriend? He's like, no, that's not my girlfriend. He's like, you talk to her every day? He said, yeah. He said, that's your girlfriend. He broke up with her, like, that night because he was like, I'm not supposed to have a girlfriend. Like, I don't even know what I'm doing right now.
Right.
Like, how can I be in a relationship if I don't even know what I want, who I am?
Yeah.
Like, I'm just getting out of prison. Like, this is crazy.
Yeah.
Like, I don't even have a real job yet.
That's the hardest part.
That mindset there, that's the mindset of someone who wants to change.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Because that is really the mindset of someone who wants to change.
Yeah,
absolutely. But there's beauty in that, because that's someone who is, this probably isn't the first time on this rodeo, right? Like, hey, I got to do something different this time. I'm willing to.
He had been in and out.
And I remember after struggling for a long time, doing pretty well, and then this self-induced struggle I created for myself again, I learned, hey, I'm not allowed to make decisions for myself right now. And the simplest things, I would run by 3 people. And whatever this consensus was, that was my choice. And I let that ride for a good amount of time, because I just when I take the reins over and I don't know what I'm doing, and I don't acknowledge that I don't know what I'm doing, every time.
Yeah.
I've never not run my life into the ground.
Dude, I did the same exact thing. So when I took over as executive director, mind you, I'm 31 years old, okay? Yeah. So, like, when I took over, I had just turned 30, right? We talk about imposter syndrome, 2, like, on 11, right? This was, like, bad. And so I've joked that I didn't even go number 2 without consulting 3 people first. You know what I mean? Like, I was literally, like, I was talking to everybody, like, and they were great about it, because, like, I got, my mom, who been in nonprofit forever, and she's, like, emotionally kind of just like, I hope she doesn't watch this, but she's a little emotionally, like, she only got so much capacity, right, for that. So she's just going to tell you exactly what you need to do. She's not going to be like, oh, I'm sorry you're feeling that way or going through that. That's not her. She's going to be like, well, you got to do this.
Bop, 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 bop.
And I'm like, in certain instances, I'd be like, man, I wanted more from you from that conversation. But in this particular venture, it was extremely useful because it just helped me make decisions. I had the board of directors at Emerge. I had Dan. I had mentors. I had a coach. I had my therapist. I had friends. I had the people I went to grad school with. I had, I had my network was crazy. And plus I had my colleagues. But there were certain things that I needed to figure out without them too. Just like I needed to find my leadership style and get to know myself in a different way. And so I think like anytime you're going through a major change in life, like at least I'm the type of person, I process things out loud, Here is not too great. It doesn't work too well up there. It's not a very constructive space.
Yeah.
It's a lot of times it's destructive.
Right.
Right. So for me,
same
like,
here.
if I'm in my element and I'm confident, this thing is great. But if I'm unsure or I'm in new territory, I need help.
Yeah, and I call that when I'm judge, jury, executioner, right? When there's an issue in my life and I keep it to myself, oftentimes I'm the one who had a lot to do with the problem to begin with, right?
Because there's shame involved.
Right. Now I'm also giving myself advice on the problem I created.
Yeah.
I'm using all my experiences, my reference points to try to solve it. What's going to be different, right? And when I'm able to invite other people in, now I have new perspectives, new ideas, and I also am removing the emotion of the situation, which
seems way bigger in your head.
correct.
Oh yeah.
And it gives you some accountability too. And I think this is like a perfect example of why things like Emerge, things like Winning Ways, support systems like these are so important, is because our best thinking doesn't get us necessarily where we want to go. Right. So having a sounding board that understands where you're coming from. Because a lot of times it's like, yeah, okay, I could go see a therapist that may or may not understand at all, or I may not feel held or seen or anything in that room, right? Because who the hell are you, right? I know you got a bunch of letters after your name, but like, who am I talking to right now? Like, and so for us to be able to, like I mentioned at the beginning of this, like we want to destigmatize mental health, is like we want to be able to like grease the wheels a little bit, help people kind of like be comfortable with that vulnerability and find their voice and figure out what exactly I would even work on if I went to therapy. Because in my head, maybe therapy was like something that they sent me to when my parents got taken away, or when I got taken away from my parents, or I was seen as a problem in school, right? When I was just like, having trouble paying attention or whatever the case may be, right? Therapy it's part of the institution, part of the, so like to be in a place where you can gain agency and be in the driver's seat of your mental health journey and like decide who gets in the car with you. You know what I mean? That's huge. Yeah. Like even you just bringing your boy down the other day, like we're still working it out, but like to have a black male therapist, like unicorn. I mean, it's like so rare to have that. And somebody who can kind of like identify, like from New Haven, gets it, passionate, right? Yeah. Like now we're like flipping that whole notion of what therapy is and can be on its head. So
no, for sure.
That's huge.
Well said.
So I know we're running low on time.
Are we?
We are, yeah. This is flowing. I mean, I could have this conversation I could have this conversation for days. And again, when we envision the Falling Up podcast, I think this is exactly really
absolutely
more in line with what it is. Where we're really being able to provide real life examples and to kind of tangible things one can do when they're stuck. And I'm hoping, I think I'll have to reflect on the conversation, but I think we hit those marks. So I'm really grateful for that.
Oh yeah.
So we always like to ask one last question of each guest. And it essentially, if you were to say one thing to someone who had just fallen down or has been fallen down for a while and is really stuck, and whether doesn't have hope or doesn't know what the next move is, one piece of advice, what would you tell them?
The first thing that popped in my head is like, the goal should be to love yourself, you know? Like, if you can get there, like that, you're golden. You're golden, because everything else is going to be great. Like, if you can figure out a way to like love yourself, to look in the mirror and like what you see. Because there were times where I wouldn't even look in the mirror when I brushed my teeth. Like,
Yeah,
you know
me
what I
too.
mean?
Yeah.
Like, I was living in my shame, you know, and I've been depressed. I've been, you know, I've dealt with these things. I have crazy anxiety. But I was blessed to be able to find a way and find community around authenticity, self-awareness, looking at those things and really like understanding them, not judging myself, not judging the people who may have had a role in certain trauma or whatever, right? Understanding that trauma, understanding that anxiety, understanding those dynamics in my family and in my relationships and whatever, and just seeing them for what they are, and just trying to love myself again. And now, like, one of the things my therapist asked me to do, because shame was a big thing. Shame is like the most terrible feeling, right? Is like, okay, when I'm in my shame, how do I show myself compassion? You know, how can I be compassionate to myself? Because I consider myself a compassionate person, but when it comes to me, I'm a real asshole, right? So like, how can I show myself compassion when I'm living inside my shame? Like, and just being in those moments where it's like, I hate myself, or I hate my life, or I hate this, I hate this part about me, or I hate the way I look, or I hate this. Like, how do I show myself love in those moments? You know? And if you just develop that muscle of like loving yourself, like, people love you more. Like, people are you make it easier for other people to love you. You know what I mean? It's just like, I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but it's just, things get greater if you can tap into that, for sure.
Yeah.
I think you said it right.
I definitely, and what I hear there in many ways and try to apply in my life is, hey, if I want to feel good, I have to do good. And I'm human and I fall short. This week, for example, a few days ago, like, I was a complete dick to someone, and it really sucked. But in the past,
I wasn't going to say nothing.
Well,
But, you know, if you want to bring it up on the show,
I love you, bro.
man.
I love you.
I let it go.
I love you.
I love you too.
But the reality, right, is in the past, I would have that same situation and I would justify why I wasn't in the wrong, or I wouldn't take that full ownership. Yeah. And what that did was it just allowed that shame, that guilt, all those feelings to last. Whereas when I acknowledged it, I'd let other people know that weren't the person, and then I let the person know and really tried to make amends and say what I'm going to do differently to try to not let this happen again. It didn't mean that the guilt wasn't there, but it gave me hope that I was going to have another opportunity where I can overcome that. And almost like a video game where like you fail the lesson time after time after time.
Yep.
Well, I'm clearly doing something wrong, right? If I can acknowledge that, figure out what I need to do, I might be able to beat this level.
Right.
And I don't know if I ever will beat the level in my lifetime, but I want to get as close as possible.
Yeah.
So,
And just one thing about what you just said, I just want to see if I get an example from you. Can you give one example of how you show yourself compassion during those moments?
Well, I had a coach who like really tried to get me to develop a practice of just gratitude. So like, there's things I like about myself, right? You know, there's things I'm proud of. And my hope would be that we all can like if you're able to sort of develop a practice of tapping into gratitude, you know, tapping into the things you like about yourself, that's just something you can just like have. You have access to that whenever you want to go there, right? So like, it's like almost like having a little bag of just like, you know, like gratitude and like nice things to tell yourself, right? And just like when you need it, you just reach in there and you just, it sounds corny, but it's just like, you got to be able to tap into that. Like I got to be able to combat, like, you know how like when a virus comes in, you have like antibodies that go and fight it.
Yep.
That's what I'm talking about. Like you got to have like gratitude and love antibodies, self-love antibodies that battle the bullshit that's coming into your head.
Yeah, I like that. I like
The
that
infantry got to be ready to combat
no
that
doubt.
negativity.
But to do that, you have to do it every single day. Even when you're not in those moments of despair.
Yes.
Because that is a skill, right? A skill is something that I can do at any time and get some desired effect. If I never played basketball before and I go into a game, I'm going to be terrible, right? That's why I practice under controlled environments.
No doubt.
So
practice.
If anyone who's listening wants to practice gratitude, right? An easy way to do it is simply make a list of things you're grateful for and think a lot deeper than just surface level shit, right? But if I do that one time and think that all of a sudden I have that skill and I'm going to be able to go to that in a time of need, right? I'm lying to myself, right? That's not how it works.
Totally.
So it needs whatever skills we develop, right? I love when people talk about anger management skills, but they don't really speak to anything specific, and they just like take a class and they're like, oh, now I got them. Like, no. That's not how life happens, right?
Right.
We have to practice.
Yeah.
So
tell yourself something good write your list down. Tell yourself something good every day. Be grateful. Be appreciative of just being here and where you're at. And the momentum's gonna keep you going forward. But every single day, kind of like when a pastor's preaching, he'll say, just don't pray when it's hard. Pray when it's good too.
Yeah.
It's the same thing.
It's just developing a practice so that you have. A coach told me we fall to our level of practice, right? So when things get hard, we're going to fall to what we've been practicing, right?
Yeah.
So like if I've been practicing that every time, if I've been practicing like drinking and smoking instead of dealing with my shit, right? That's what I'm going to, and that's what I know. I could be doing great, not drinking, not smoking, but when shit gets hard, that's what I'm going to go to.
right, if I don't have an alternative skill, right?
If I haven't developed another practice. So
Every time.
we fall to our level of practice. So what are you practicing on a daily basis? Because that's likely what you're going to end up doing when shit hits the fan, right?
Yeah.
Well, I truly, truly appreciate you being here, man. I had a fun time today.
Yeah.
So
This is really good.
Yeah. No, we'll definitely have to do it again.
Anytime, man.
Yeah.
This is honestly kind of therapeutic for me too. It's just like having these talks. You know?
Yeah, likewise.
So, love doing this. This is the best part of working at Emerge is having these conversations.
Nice.
So,
Awesome. Well, thanks everybody for listening, and we'll catch everybody later.
Falling Up Podcast.